So it's good to have Jamil up here and get in front of everybody, and you passed your first test, so we'll keep you around a little bit longer, so that's great. Before I do get into my section, though, I've been asked to provide a little bit of a public service announcement to everybody, and so while K-State really appreciates everybody being here for the Swine Day, it sounds like some of our parking police don't appreciate the way some of us parked in our parking spots, and so especially if you're over in the parking garage, if you happen to back into the parking spot as opposed to driving in, we've been told that they may issue a little bit of a citation if you don't go and turn your vehicle around. And so passing that along to everyone right now, and you can choose to do whatever you want to with that information. But tell Lois I did my job. So getting back to the data here, and what we really want to talk about, some of the amino acid work that we've been doing here lately. And so I've got the opportunity to talk about some of the research that Bo and Andres and Larissa and Julie have conducted here for our team. And I've got, I think, 7 or 8 trials we'll talk about right here. Only 2 or 3 slides per each trial, so we'll move pretty quickly as we go from one to the next. But we're going to start out right here in a study that Bo conducted with us. And appreciate some of CJ's support for this trial here. This is a study in late nursery. Started these pigs about 20 pounds, went to approximately 80 pounds, increasing the amount of synthetic lysine and the other amino acids from low levels of around 5 pounds per ton of synthetic lysine up to about 14 pounds of synthetic lysine per ton of feed. And so in the high and the very high, we actually added synthetic amino acids all the way up to synthetic isoleucine in those diets. Saw an improvement in average daily gain as we went to this medium level of synthetic amino acids added, and a depression in growth performance as we added even higher levels of synthetics in those diets. And so what we also noticed in these pigs at the high and the very high levels, we saw an increase in feed intake as well. So we didn't supply what those pigs were looking for, which resulted in poor feed efficiency on those high and very high levels of synthetic amino acids in a later nursery type of a phase right here. And so key message right here, for sure can increase some of the synthetic amino acids, but if we go too high, we will have some depressions in growth performance. So keeping a medium level, approximately 8 pounds of synthetic lysine per ton of complete feed, and consequently the other associated synthetic amino acids in there as well, led to the greatest performance. As you guys know, we've been talking about branched chain amino acid relationships for the last number of years, and it really started with some work that Enrique Samin conducted with us when we looked at some prediction equations on looking at performance of balanced and branched chain amino acids when we have high levels of leucine in the diets. And so we continue to do some of this research. In this particular study, we had a control diet that had higher levels of soybean meal, and then low, medium, and high ratios of isoleucine, valine, and tryptophan to lysine. All of these, again, in diets that would be relatively high in leucine to lysine ratio. What you notice right here, as we increase the amount of valine, isoleucine, and tryptophan from low to medium to high levels, we see increases in average daily gain. No change in feed efficiency as we change those levels of synthetic amino, or of isoleucine, valine, and tryptophan. All of the diets resulting in a similar feed efficiency as our soybean meal control. To remember that with Enrique's trials, he had a prediction equation that he created, and so we went back and measured the performance that Bo observed here in his study back to the prediction equation. And what we noticed that when we set the diets to have a similar prediction and actual average daily gain in the control, we actually under-predicted the performance of the low ratio, got fairly similar in our medium ratio diets, but over-predicted the performance in the high ratio right here. And actually the high ratio diets actually would have predicted performance at a level greater than the soybean meal control right here. And so definitely illustrates the need to continue to focus on the relationship of branched chain amino acids, especially when there's high leucine to lysine in our diets. However, it's not a continuing curve right here, and so we will be able to max out performance at very high levels. Again, shows the need to continue some of this research and further demonstrate where some of these prediction equations can go to estimate performance of these pigs by influencing the branched chain amino acid ratios. There's also been a number of research studies here lately and ideas that when you have higher levels of fiber in your diets, you need to increase the amount of threonine because of increased mucin production and the threonine content in the mucin. And so we decided to conduct a study where we had diets with no DDG or low fiber, and then diets with distillers grains in it as a fiber source, with and without, or with normal levels of threonine and then elevated levels of threonine. As you can see right here for average daily gain, this would have been through the whole grow finish period. No change in average daily gain from increasing the level of threonine. We did get the typical depression in gain that we might have expected when we saw an increase in fiber included in those diets. Also no change in feed efficiency from increasing the threonine in these diets. No interaction between fiber and threonine level, which again indicates that at least when DDGS is the source of the fiber in these diets, there is not a need to increase the amount of threonine in those diets to increase potential mucin production. Now I'm going to talk through a series of trials that we've conducted in the late finishing studies right here, or late finisher. Most of these studies would have been started around 220 pounds, carried to 285 to close to 300 pounds. Here's a study where we fed low, medium, or high levels of feed-grade amino acids. This is associated with about 3 pounds of synthetic lysine in the low diet, about 6 pounds in the medium, about 8 pounds in the high diet right here. We also fed a diet where we had the high levels of synthetic amino acids plus elevated amino acid ratios. And so we talked about some of the branch chain relationship in the previous slides. We hadn't always done that most of the time when high leucine was present, but this is a corn soy diet right here where we didn't have elevated leucine, so we wondered if we increased those amino acid ratios again, would we see some additional benefits? And in the course of this trial, again, light finishing only, no difference in average daily gain observed from increasing the level of synthetic amino acids or changing the amino acid ratio, either on average daily gain or feed efficiency. So again, all of these diets result in the same performance. As a point of reference, these high diets had a little bit over 11% crude protein. So we still had relatively levels of crude protein in these diets that we'd expect, or what we'd show that we'd need for these pigs. Now I'm going to show you a series of 3 different studies where we looked at late finishing soybean meal level or inclusion levels in diets. And so the first couple slides I'll show in corn-based diets, then I'll show some DDG diets, and then some wheat mids diets. And so in this particular study right here, we increased the soybean meal level from 5% to about 20%. In late finishing, again, starting from about 220 to about 280 pounds. As a point of reference, this got down just about 10% crude protein in that 5% soybean meal diet. And interestingly, for these first 3 diets, we actually also had to include histidine in some of these diets. And so we formulated with lysine, methionine, threonine, tryptophan, valine, isoleucine, and histidine to be able to meet the performance of these pigs. So on paper, all the nutrients that we would typically formulate to should be balanced right here. We'd expect similar performance, but clearly shows that when we get down to too low of soybean meal or potentially crude protein right here, we had a depression in average daily gain. Saw also an increase in feed efficiency in these particular pigs right here. And so at least 8.75% soybean meal in these diets. That correlates to about 11.5% crude protein if you're looking as a Boyce point right there from crude protein perspective. Switching gears, similar type of a trial, soybean meal titration in diets that contain 25% distillers grains. And so again, as a point of reference, because of the higher crude protein content in the distillers, actually this diet with 0% soybean meal had about 13.5% crude protein. Numerically, we did see a little bit of an increase in performance up to the 8% inclusion of soybean meal. However, no statistical difference across these diets by increasing the level of soybean meal in diets that had about 25% distillers. Also saw no statistical difference in feed efficiency by increasing the level of soybean meal when we had 25% of distillers in these diets. Again, we already had 13.5% crude protein in the lowest level of soybean meal, which is a level of crude protein we would expect to be able to meet the needs of those pigs in this late finishing phase. Last study that we conducted in this series as well too contained about 30% wheat mids. Again, a late finishing diet where we went from 0 to about 16% soybean meal in these diets. These diets right here were about 11% crude protein as a point of reference. We saw an increase in average daily gain as we increased soybean meal. However, the biggest majority of that bump was with at least 4% soybean meal being added in those diets, having a significant improvement in average daily gain. And also in feed efficiency, where we again saw a linear and a cubic response, where going down to 4% soybean meal added in these wheat midge diets resulted in improvement in feed efficiency, with a further improvement in feed efficiency to the highest level of soybean meal. All right, last slide that I've got for you is just to talk a little bit about some of the lysine shortage that we're all experiencing right now in the industry. And if you're not experiencing a lysine shortage, great. I don't know what you're doing, but you're the lucky one right there. But definitely with some of the shipping constraints, some of the reductions in local production, we've had some issues here of late. Right now, some of the estimates are some of the shortage of lysine continuing into Q2 of 2022. Maybe some relief a little bit earlier than that, but it's something that we need to be really aware of. And so when it comes to formulating diets, you've already seen some of my slides right here. We're adding up to sometimes 15 pounds of synthetic lysine in some of these diets. This is going to play a big role in how we formulate diets for our pigs. And so if we get into situations where we have reductions in available lysine, I mean, the first thing, if you have any availability to use liquid lysine, for sure we can go in and be able to replace that in these formulations. Most of the time you don't have liquid lysine and dry lysine in the same feed mill, but if you have that capability, be able to do so. But if we get into these shortages of lysine, we really want to make sure that we're conserving that lysine for nursery and lactation diets, where we need that synthetic lysine as much as we can. So we can reduce it some in gestation, some in the finishing diets. What this will do, though, is it'll increase the demand for other protein ingredients. This has been a pretty rapid change in the market right now. Unfortunately, faster than maybe what we can keep up with the demand from soybean meal production. And so we do know there's some areas where we're starting to see some lower availabilities of soybean meal even being available. And so, in those situations, there's not too many other options available, but definitely this will also reduce the demand for other feed-grade amino acids you have in your diets. If we can't add synthetic lysine in, we're not going to have a big demand for threonine or valine or anything else in there. And so definitely changes coming really rapidly. The big goal here, I think, is being proactive in your inventory management, making sure you know what you've got on the floor as quickly as you can, so you can make those adjustments before you go out that day and realize you don't have any more lysine in the mill, because you can't do anything at that point. And so if you have any questions on this, feel free to get a hold of any of us and we can help through any of those types of formulation issues that you might have. And so with